9 experienced hikers. A sub-zero mountain expedition. A tent slashed from the inside and bodies found scattered in the snow, some with inexplicable injuries. What happened on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl in the Ural Mountains remains one of the most chilling enigmas of the 20th century. The Soviet authorities closed the case, citing an irresistible force, leaving behind a mystery that sparked decades of conspiracy theories, from secret military tests to supernatural phenomena. Tonight, we strip away the myths and examine the cold, hard facts of the 9 who never returned. Subscribe to Mind 74. If this dossier keeps you hooked, subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell. Comment below your thoughts on this mystery and share this video. January 27, 1959. Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, led a group of 9 experienced hikers on a trek through the northern Ural Mountains. The objective of the expedition was to reach the mountain Torton. The group consisted of 7 men and 2 women. They reached the village of Vazai, the last inhabited settlement, on January 28th. The next day, one member of the group, Yuri Yudin, turned back due to illness. This left 8 men and 2 women to continue the journey. They entered the mountain pass on February 1st. They set up their base camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name translates to Dead Mountain in the local Mansi language. The weather conditions deteriorated rapidly as night fell. They pitched their tent on the exposed slope rather than the shelter of the forest line nearby. This decision remains a point of intense analysis for investigators. The group did not send the scheduled radio signal on February 12th. Their families waited for days in panic. A search and rescue operation began on February 20th. The rescuers found the abandoned tent on February 26th. The tent was ripped open from the inside. Their equipment, including boots and warm clothing, remained inside the tent. The search team tracked footprints leading away from the site. Some footprints belonged to people wearing socks or walking barefoot. The rescuers followed the tracks toward the edge of the forest. They found the first 2 bodies, Yuri Krivonischenko and Yuri Doroshenko, near the remnants of a fire. They were dressed only in their underwear. The rescuers discovered 3 more bodies, including Dyatlov, in the distance between the fire and the tent. These victims appeared to have died while attempting to return to the camp. The search team spent weeks looking for the remaining 4 members. They finally located the last 4 hikers in a ravine on May 4th. Their condition shocked the investigators. The final 4 hikers possessed severe physical injuries. Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, and Alexander Kolevatov suffered from massive chest and skull trauma. The medical examiner compared the force required for these injuries to that of a high-speed car crash. The survivors lacked external bruises, indicating the damage occurred internally. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue and her eyes. The investigators found radioactive isotopes on the clothing of several victims. They could not explain how the radiation reached the remote mountainside. The forensic team conducted autopsies on all 9 bodies. They determined the primary cause of death for most was hypothermia. The severity of the injuries on the last 4 victims contradicted the initial hypothesis of a simple exposure death. The investigators examined the tent for any signs of an outside intruder. They found no footprints other than those made by the hikers. They concluded that something forced the hikers to evacuate the tent in a state of panic. The survivors ran into the darkness without adequate protection from the extreme cold. The temperatures dropped below 30 degrees Celsius that night. The group attempted to start a fire near the trees, but they lacked the necessary materials. They failed to construct an effective shelter. The rescuers documented the scene with precision. They captured photographs of the gear and the orientation of the tent. These photographs later became central to the analysis of the incident. The authorities initiated a formal criminal investigation. They summoned witnesses from the local Mansi indigenous population. The Mansi people denied any involvement in the deaths. The police eventually cleared them of all suspicions. The investigators focused on the possibility of a catastrophic avalanche. They theorized that a snow slide struck the tent and forced the hikers to flee. However, the site showed no signs of a large-scale snow movement. The terrain remained relatively stable throughout the investigation. The investigators looked for other natural causes. They considered the impact of infrasound, a low-frequency sound caused by wind in the mountains. This theory suggested that the sound induced a state of panic in the group. The researchers continued to document every detail found at the location. They recorded the positions of the bodies and the sequence of the items left behind. The files contained sketches of the ravine and the forest edge. They noted the lack of any animal tracks in the vicinity. The official report concluded that an irresistible force caused the deaths. This vague language fueled the public distrust of the Soviet authorities. The case remained an open wound for the families of the victims. They demanded a complete explanation of the physical evidence. The investigators processed the remaining clothing for chemical analysis. They looked for any trace of unusual substances or toxic gases. The results returned negative for most conventional poisons. The group left a journal behind that chronicled the early stages of their trek. The entries described the group's high morale and physical preparedness. There was no indication of conflict within the team. The puzzle defied the standard logic of mountain survival. The Soviet authorities closed the investigation in May 1959. They designated the incident a classified event. The government restricted access to the files for several decades. This secrecy invited widespread speculation from the public. Journalists and independent researchers scrutinized the report for inconsistencies. They identified gaps in the timeline of the final hours. The investigators re-examined the theory of military involvement. They checked for reports of missile tests in the region on the night of the incident. Some witnesses in the surrounding towns reported seeing glowing spheres in the sky that evening. The military denied any connection to the hikers' deaths. The investigation faced criticism for its lack of transparency. The forensic team lacked the resources to analyze the radioactive traces fully. The scientific community at the time struggled to explain the combination of internal trauma and hypothermia. The families of the hikers formed a committee to keep the case alive. They met with officials to demand the release of all documents. The government gradually declassified parts of the report in the late 1980s. These records revealed that the authorities had more information than they initially disclosed. The documents included details about the search efforts and the confusion of the rescuers. They confirmed that the investigation faced pressure for higher-level officials. Researchers conducted modern simulations of the events on the slope. They used computer models to test the avalanche hypothesis. The studies proved that a small-scale snow slab could strike a tent without triggering a massive slide. This model explained the injuries caused by the pressure of the snow. Other theories emerged involving localized weather phenomena. Scientists investigated the presence of katabatic winds. These winds can produce extreme force in narrow mountain passages. The research continued to attract international attention. Experts traveled to the Ural Mountains to replicate the conditions of the camp. They studied the snow density and the slope angle. The findings provided a more rational basis for the hikers' actions. The community of researchers organized conferences to share new evidence. They compared their findings with the original photographs. The truth remained elusive despite the years of dedicated study. The investigators faced the limitation of the lack of living witnesses. They relied entirely on the documentation created in 1959. Every piece of evidence underwent a new round of scrutiny. The consensus remained split between natural accidents and human error. The researchers tracked the history of other mountaineering incidents in the region. They identified similar patterns of behavior in survival situations. The case of the Dyatlov Pass Incident became a global reference point. It highlighted the challenges of mountain expeditions. The record remained the primary source of truth for the public. The government eventually allowed independent expeditions to visit the site. These teams brought back new data regarding the geography of the pass. They confirmed that the environment was harsher than the original report suggested. The investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident evolved into a multidisciplinary effort. The Russian prosecutor's office reopened the case in 2019. They launched a final attempt to resolve the mystery. A team of forensic experts reviewed all available evidence and revisited the slope. They utilized modern investigative techniques to reconstruct the events. The prosecutor's office released the final report in 2020. They concluded that the incident was the result of a small slab avalanche. The report stated that the hikers survived the initial snow strike. They exited the tent to reach a safe location in the woods. They attempted to start a fire to stay warm. The extreme cold overwhelmed them as they failed to return to the tent. The physical injuries on the last 4 hikers occurred as a result of the pressure of the snow that followed the initial event. The authorities explained the missing soft tissue as a result of the natural decomposition process. The report formally closed the case as a natural disaster. The families accepted the scientific verdict after years of doubt. The mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident officially transitioned from a crime mystery to a tragic tale of mountain survival. The incident serves as a primary case study in mountaineering safety. It reminds us of the power of the natural environment. We respect the memory of the 9 who died on the slopes of the Ural Mountains. Their story remains a part of history. We documented the facts and the impact of these events for the future. The legacy of Dossier 37 is one of tragedy and the pursuit of truth. We view the events through the lens of historical reflection. The case is closed, but it is not forgotten. The records remain available for any future scientific inquiry. The investigation taught the world about the need for preparation in harsh climates. We honor the hikers by maintaining the safety standards that arose from their story. The Dyatlov Pass incident stands as a definitive point of change for Soviet mountaineering. The world shifted in the aftermath of 1959. We operate with safer practices because of the lessons learned from their loss. The ghost of the mountain still lingers in the stories of the Ural Range. The names of Igor Dyatlov and his team remain in the record for all time. We documented the full sequence of the tragedy. This concludes our review of the case. The archives are open, and the story of the hikers continues to unfold as we look into the past. We remain satisfied that the scientific explanation provides a resolution to the mystery. The investigation into the Dyatlov Pass is a journey that has reached its destination. We hold the memory of the 9 in the light of our research. The facts remain, and the record endures. Subscribe to Mind 74. If you reach the end, subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell. Comment below your thoughts on this mystery, and share this video to help us grow the community.